right, you guys, podcast time.
Chew. It's quieter.
Fucking podcasting right now.
Chew quieter.
And now, to the podcast studio.
Welcome back to Chew Quieter. And today we have a special guest. His name is Joey Hamilton. He is an author of Memoirs of a Serial Bachelor. He was a candidate for Aurora City Council at one point. And he's the only friend that I know of that is pretty well versed in politics. And that's what this show today is about, is politics. So Joey, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming. Yeah, of course.
All right, so let's first talk about the book. This was written almost 13 years ago, 14 years ago or something?
Yeah, it came out right around, depending on format, came out between like late July and early September of 2010. So yeah, it'd be 14 years this summer.
All right, so kind of just summarize what the book is about.
Yeah, I mean, so it's about like sex, dating, relationships. It was through the eyes of me at that time. And the kind of way that it was written was I just wanted to handle a certain amount of topics that weren't necessarily addressed in plotless books, such as like what the stuff that Tucker Max put out. So I was kind of trying to do the entertainment thing, but also making sure that there were some topics like STDs and stuff like that, pregnancy and abortion, and those type of topics that weren't typically being covered in say male focused or male written books at that time.
So we're about the same age. Armando is a little bit older than us. So during our time in high school and, between college and that sort of time frame, not too many of us used condoms, even though we were supposed to, because there was a big fear of AIDS. Mm-hmm. It's kind of amazing that none of us really got really sick.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to think at that time you could kind of profile a little bit to know, what you may get yourself into with depending on who you were going to sleep with. If you were sleeping with the office bike, you might come down with something, right?
I just got lucky.
It could be that too, man. It could be that too.
There was times where afterwards I'm like, what did I just fucking do? Why did I raw dog her? I shouldn't have. I know who she's been with. I know where she's been around. So definitely luck has been a factor.
Yeah, it's one of those things like especially if it was somebody who was well known amongst your group of friends. Maybe you had Eskimo brothers and you kind of had a little bit of maybe you kind of already knew that you were going to be fine, or if it happened, at least you kind of made yourself your own support group or something, right?
Yeah. So I actually had a friend. I was interested in this girl, and I didn't know until afterwards. I was gonna get with her that night. And one of my friends said, "Oh yeah, Michael was with her like last month or something like that, and now he has scabies." And I was like, "Really? Canceling this one?"
Mm-hmm.
So
maybe at least you got ahead of it. It's better than finding out after the fact, which we didn't have text message or anything back. At least I didn't have a cell. I mean, I had a cell phone in '96, but I wasn't texting until the early 2000s. So anything I was getting into in the '90s, it was like.
Yeah,
you really know.
I still had a pager. That's how long ago this was. So
mid '90s, man.
Yeah, I actually did get with a girl that was in the Navy one time, and the night we were supposed to get together, she's like, "Do you have condoms?" I'm like, "I can get some." She's like, "You probably want to get some." And when she put it like that, I was like, "Why did you say it like that?" She's like, "Well, just in case." And I was like, oh, fuck. She's in the Navy, too, so this is probably a bad idea.
She'd been ran to the sub.
Yeah.
Any port.
Exactly.
She was probably bunk buddies with her friend Sean, and Sean's probably... he's put his dick in everything except the pencil sharpener.
That's good.
So, all right. You, at one point, this was a couple years ago, right? You ran for the city council in Aurora, Colorado.
Yeah, so that would have been, let me think, it would have been the election in 2022, I believe. So yeah, November of 2022. So a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago.
What was your main reasoning for running for office?
honestly, it's pretty selfish, to be completely frank, which, from politicians, you kind of inherently think they're pretty selfish anyway.
Trying to get laid?
No, dude, no, nothing like that. Nothing like that. No, it was, so Aurora, I don't know how many of your viewers know. I'll give a little background about the city, right? So Aurora, in terms of square mileage or in terms of size, right, is the largest city in Colorado. It's third largest in population, I believe, next to Colorado Springs and I think obviously Denver. But Aurora is situated almost like a kidney, like on the outside of Denver, to the east. And it's when I moved to Colorado in 2006. Everyone called Aurora Saudi Aurora because it was a pretty rough area, and that got progressively worse over the time, over the 15 years that I lived out that direction, right? And I just started noticing that things were getting worse and worse and worse. I lived at the south. I lived just south of the Mississippi Gate, the south gate of Buckley Space Force Base, the largest employer in the city of Aurora. It has about 12,000 employees, and you would think it would be kind of a safe haven in some regards, but I noticed in my community things getting progressively worse, and that's from crime to taxes to anything was going on in the city. Like it was one thing after another. Things were just getting progressively worse. I'm like, you know what? I want to do something about this. When I decided I wanted to run, it was the same time that a good friend of mine, a Republican, he had decided to run as well for our ward. It's like our district, the same area that we all lived in. And he was running in there. He was at that point running unopposed, and we were, 5.5, 6 months out of the election. And I was like, I'm not going to let him run unopposed. And I knew him. I obviously knew him personally, being a friend of mine, but politically, I also kind of knew that he was he is a typical MAGA Trump fan. I think we all can all understand or have that picture painted in our heads when we see that individual. And I was like, I know how he feels about some things. I know how I feel about some things. He'd come over for poker nights and we get liquored up and bullshit about politics or whatever. So I was like, I'm not going to let him run unopposed. So that's what was essentially like the nail in the coffin, if you will, that pushed me into running.
So you're not a Democrat. You're more along the lines of a libertarian, right?
I am a registered libertarian. I support the Libertarian Party. I have for a number of years.
So now for those people that are too stupid to realize, there is a difference between being a liberal and a libertarian. Can you go into what exactly the policies are within the Libertarian Party?
Yeah. So let's back up. So liberalism, right? So before there was progressivism, liberalism and libertarianism were actually relatively similar. Libertarianism didn't start until I believe the Libertarian Party was founded in 1976 in Colorado Springs. But if you look at the Libertarian Party today, it is relatively similar in some ways to how old republicanism looked, or even before there was republicanism, how liberalism looked back in the early 1900s, right? It was essentially about liberty, right? The root of liberalism is liberty. The root of libertarianism is, I think, more obviously liberty. But libertarianism today is more along the lines of personal autonomy, which a lot of Republicans truly believe in. They want personal autonomy, right? They don't want to be told what to do. They want to be able to do their own thing. They want to be left alone. That's why I recently moved into the mountains of Colorado. I was like, I want to be left alone. I don't want to have to deal with neighbors. Just get away from it all, right? So that's in short what libertarianism today. Now, obviously, it's way, way more deep than that as political parties go, right? There's so many complexities within each of the parties, within any party, that just because somebody believes in X, Y, and Z, someone within the same party may not believe in X, Y, and Z, but they may get along with, A through W or what have you, right? Mm-hmm. But I guess I can more directly answer your question. Libertarianism, being personal autonomy, is if you're the type of person who has seen the political compass or the political chart where it's got essentially the quadrants and the different colors, right? Libertarianism would essentially be the bottom half of that, and libertarianism is typically defined by anti-authoritarianism. Again, personal autonomy, not wanting to be told what to do, being personally responsible, right? Within personal responsibility, you typically don't want handouts. You take, if you screw up, you take your own lumps. You try to figure out how to get through things in life, that sort of thing.
So do you think today's Libertarian Party is more left leaning or right leaning?
So the Libertarian Party is a little bit of both right and left. Traditional libertarianism, I think people would probably identify or think of it being right leaning. The left leaning libertarianism or the anti-authoritarianism is what we know as the Green Party.
Okay.
Which would be the fourth largest political party. Go ahead.
And at one point, where's the divide at within the party for constitutional rights versus taking away or amending these rights?
Typically, within most libertarians are essentially want everything defined by the Constitution. So they'd be pro-constitutionist.
Okay. So do you think that should be, is that just a separate sect, do you think, or is it just still within the party? It's just that's how that person leans.
Like I was saying before, right? Like within each party, you have people that believe in. Everyone believes in certain things. You may, if you identify as a Republican, you may find things in the Libertarian Party that you believe in that you think the Republican Party stands on, and maybe the Republican Party doesn't stand on those things anymore because a majority of people within the party have moved, a different direction over the years, right? Mm-hmm. But I would say your prototypical libertarian is. And I think this is what we kind of see if you can ever find it on the news, right? Your prototypical libertarian is being painted as an extremely right individual, which there's very few and far between that I think are either, farther right than, let's say, a typical MAGA Republican.
So the last libertarian that actually had some decent traction was Gary Johnson.
Yeah, former New Mexico governor.
At what point do you think there's going to be an actual chance for a third party like this?
This is you're going to start to learn how libertarians function, right? We are always very, very critical of the party. I want to start off by saying that I am the current assistant treasurer for the Libertarian National Party. So I do have ties to the party itself. And even then, I will tell you out and out, there's more things that I hate about the party than I like about the party. And I think it's very typical libertarian because we're very, I don't know, man. We like to just bitch about stuff, I guess. So please repeat your question so that way I can make sure I hit it.
So we always constantly see a two-party system. At what point do you think the third party is going to be a viable source or a viable option for other people to vote for?
We can't seem to find a decent candidate. So we ran Joe Jorgensen in the last election against Trump against Trump and Biden. We've got we're going through the process of identifying candidates right now, similar to, and I think we're going to get into talking about like how primaries and caucuses will essentially funnel out candidates for the Republican and Democratic parties. We do something a little bit different in the Libertarian Party. But I would say even with Gary getting the nomination, we haven't had a decent candidate since the late 70s when Ron Paul was still a libertarian before he dipped his toes in republicanism and got traction that way. He had to do that in order to gain traction. But we haven't had a decent candidate as far as I'm concerned and since basically the founding of the party in 1976. Wow. So I think the only way we're going to become relevant is, and it's a very long process, to be completely frank. A third party, we are extraordinarily stifled by the Republicans and Democrats that I quite frankly don't think in my lifetime we will ever see a viable libertarian presidential candidate. I hope I'm wrong, but I guess time will tell. But we're so stifled by the other two parties that I think we have to have the right candidate, and then we have to be able to have a way to get that candidate in front of 300 plus million people in this country. And you'd be surprised at how difficult it is when you don't have the funding and you don't have the media attention and you can't get the media time to get another candidate in front of somebody. If you think about having a third candidate, the last third candidate, if you want to call it that we've had that was actually relevant was Ross Perot. And for those that remember Ross Perot was worth billions and he spent billions in order to get up there. And he still, he pulled 18, 19% he ran twice, if I remember correctly. In the first of those two runs, I think he still got less than 20%, but I think he had to spend three to five times as much as what the Republican and Democratic candidates had to get the same amount of time.
So with today being more along the lines of marketing a candidate through social media, there was a point made in an article that I read recently that the Libertarian Party might want to recruit Vivek Ramaswamy. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I can never pronounce his name correctly.
Vivek, yeah.
And the reasons outlined was because he already has a following. He's already can draw in money to his campaign without any outside help other than his name right now at this point, because he's already got some good traction. A lot of his points do line up with some of the Libertarian Party's ideas. So do you think that would actually be a viable two-part question? Do you think that's something viable for him to do, to actually be a candidate in an actual running? And then is that something that the party would actually entertain?
So it's a little more complicated than that, just because the way that we do things in the Libertarian Party. But just directly answering the question. So I've heard, people say, of the Republican candidates that we saw in the debates, right? Vivek was probably the most popular to most of the libertarians that I know. But like I said before, we're always unhappy. We're always curmudgeons when it comes to everything. So, for me, I would watch the debates and be like, okay, obviously Vivek has a lot of good thoughts, or, intentions, if you will. He would probably be successful in his run, meaning that, if he were to become part of the party and then decide he wanted to run as a libertarian and then go through the process of getting the nomination, which is a very, very long-winded process that won't resolve itself until the national convention, which is in, I believe, March, might be May this year. It's possible, right? But the thing is, depending on how much research you do, there's also, and we kind of talked about how libertarianism being anti-authoritarianism and being essentially that bottom part of the political compass or the political chart. There's a lot of people that want RFK to run as a libertarian candidate. And if you think about that, I mean, he was running as a Democrat. He would be essentially a non-conservative type of libertarian. He would be that Green Party type of person, but he was getting traction from people in the Libertarian Party because of his stance on the shots, right? On his stance on COVID and such. So it's in the time that I've been following and affiliated with the party, we go through this every presidential election cycle where there is a flunky, if you will, from either the Republicans or the Democrats who have, some intentions or policies, or however you want to look at it, that do align with our party, and they naturally get attached to it. So it's a matter of someone actually ever wanting to do it, and I quite frankly don't think it'll happen. But Vivek has already been told that he's got a cabinet position when Trump wins the election later this year. Mm. So I don't think he would ruin the opportunity of him, especially his political career, by joining the Libertarian Party and then foregoing the opportunity to have a cabinet position with Trump next year.
Does your party? Oh, go ahead, Armando.
I see Vivek being top contender for a VP position.
It's quite possible. I don't. If you looked at the most recent vice presidents, they're always very, very quiet and pretty much off the radar. It's kind of hard to find Kamala Harris right now. It was always hard to find Dick Cheney during the Bush regimes, right? Mike Pence was basically, a seat, right? Vivek is a very gregarious individual, and I just don't. It would be very interesting to see if that's where they go, just because it's typically not the VP. They don't want someone who's going to overshadow, the presidential candidate, right? Whomever the RNC decides to tap.
Yeah, but my idea of that is it deflects a lot. It gives a lot more depth to the Trump side and adds some color to what is painted as very white. I think there's a lot of plus in that idea of him becoming a VP that could really help make the MAGA stigmata go away.
It's possible, right? But if you think if you've watched the debates or you followed Vivek in the past, from his business ventures and such, you know that he wants to get in and get his hands dirty and do something. And that the VP is a pretty much hands-off role unless something happens to Trump, which, let's be honest, both him and Biden are extraordinarily old. Well, old for the position is the best way to put it. And I think Vivek would want to be in a position where he can affect some form of actual change. And the VP role would be almost more of a figurehead type of thing because he would just be there and not really doing much. And I would like to see someone with his skills be in a cabinet position that could go through an overhaul. Although, again, as a libertarian, I want to eliminate all forms of government. But you put Vivek in a job where he can affect some change, reduce government spending, reduce government oversight, which are all things that he wants to do. I think would be very good for the country, and I think it'd be very good for him. And I think it aligns more with his personality versus going into a VP role where and this is going to sound bad, and I apologize for it, but you talk about adding some color. You just don't do what the Democrats did and add a brown guy to the ticket and then just say, hey, look, we've got diversity, and then you go shove him in a closet for 4 years.
There's a difference, though, between this brown guy and the black woman that's in there that actually has no track record of anything successful, though. So, I mean,
she successfully prosecuted thousands of black people and put them in prison for weed.
That is true.
She successfully sucked a lot of dick.
That is true. Also. But do you think him being a VP can actually help burn the candle at both ends by having that stature from that seat?
The possibility is there. My personal stance on it is this. The Democratic Party is doing a phenomenal job of shooting themselves in the foot by constantly propping up people that are ruining the country. And there are Democrats, people that voted for Biden, people that have voted for Bernie, people that have voted for other Democrats that are seeing what's going on in the country over the last few years. Let's call it really since COVID kicked off. And I personally know a lot of Democrats who are not going to vote for Biden this year. Yeah. Now, does that mean they're going to vote for Trump? Probably not, because quite frankly, everybody in the Democratic Party hates Trump, and that's what makes this election and previous elections so wonderfully volatile. It's like a college football game. It's Georgia and Alabama. One team hates the other team so damn much. Will those votes come to a third party, whether it's the major third party being the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, or there's 20 some odd other parties that do receive votes during presidential elections? It'll be interesting to see where those votes go. I personally, and this is again as a person who's in third party and watches both sides with scathing eyes, I think the Democratic Party is doing a very good job of making themselves look inept and being inept and possibly moving some of those votes to other parties, again, whether that's the Republican Party or whether that's another party. I think the election will show us, though, that people want change. 70% of voters are going to be, voting with their pocketbook this year. If you're voting with your wallet or your pocketbook, you're typically not going to vote for a Democrat who's going to continue to send money to Ukraine, send money to Israel, spend money on transgender surgeries within the military and things like that. You're typically going to see people that are trying to tighten the pocketbooks because of the inflation and everything else that's been caused over the course of the last 5 years or so. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that no matter who Trump picks as a VP, no matter how his cabinet choices go, I'm sure there'll be plenty of news around it, plenty of things that they screw up I don't think it'll really matter, to be honest with you.
So you brought up Ukraine, and the border bill is something that I wanted to also talk about. And it looks like Democrats are wanting to send them even more money now. And I think it was, at last I read, it was $180 billion that was being proposed altogether in this bill.
Yeah, something like that. That got shot down. It's been shot down twice now. And I think that, I mean, you know how these bills go, right? They take one topic that becomes a title, but then the rest of the book, if you will, because these things are lengthy, it's all stuff doing it. It's every other senator, every other representative's little earmarks and bullshit that's how it goes. It really seems like, from what I've read, that they're trying to unpack the three major things in this border bill, which does include money to Ukraine and does include money to Israel. And they're trying to unpack the Ukraine and Israel piece to vote on afterwards, and trying to get the border thing addressed now. And quite frankly, the reason why that is because it's the hotter topic going into the election.
I think this is something that was majorly dropped by Biden's administration. You now hear that they want to close the border, even though they ridiculed Trump and said he was xenophobe and he was racist for trying to do this. Now they're trying to do the same thing, but they're doing it under the guise of, well, it's because, we're having some issues, not because we're racist. Now you're looking at Chicago with an influx of illegals. You're looking at New York with an influx of illegals. The Roosevelt Hotel is packed with illegals. Illegals are getting $2,000 and a cell phone when they come into the country. There's been reports of people entering the country, exiting the country, and coming back in and working the system to put money in their pocket. I mean, at what point do we just look at it and remove the bullshit and say, look at motherfucker, you fucked up. We all fucked up, especially the Democrats looking at it and say, we fucked up. We should have listened to Trump, even though it kind of sounded like bullshit that he was going to make Mexico pay for the wall. Maybe that was a great fucking idea.
It was never going to happen. You know that. It was just, it's all just lip speak to be able to get elected, to just garner votes. That's all it is. And the name calling is the same thing. It's all just horribly grandiose marketing to take Georgia and Alabama and make them hate each other more and more and more, right? Obviously not the states, but the football teams. That's all it is. It's just creating division. The border is a very interesting situation, because my personal opinion has always been that open borders being a Democrat ideology, so that they can bring in more traditionally liberal, neoliberal Democrat voters to be able to essentially prop themselves up for subsequent elections. I think a lot of people still believe that. Yeah, essentially, it's just like having dead people cast votes, right? This is a game, and it does benefit them to be able to win. The Republicans have got their own ways of doing these things as well. You have to take a step back sometimes and look at it for the corrupt corporate entity that it is. And until you do that, until you start thinking about the system, this two-party system critically, it's easy to get lost, right? Like my girlfriend, her father is first-generation Mexican, moved here, crossed the border, went and got a citizenship test. Their entire family has went through something similar, and they are the most Trump-loving people that I've ever met in my entire life. And they are the antithesis, the opposite of what I typically thought about the traditional Mexican person crossing the border, going to come in and vote for a Democrat. And, so it's kind of turned the way that I've even looked at the whole thing, even though I've got my libertarian views on borders, which, to be completely frank, there's, in my mind, two topics within the Libertarian Party that people disagree on and fight about constantly. It's abortion, or the right to life, and then borders, because our border stance in the Libertarian Party is it should be open borders, but it should be privately owned, not state owned, which means if I own the land and someone crosses my property, and say I own land southeast of El Paso, some dude, I'll use the dude reference, some guy crosses the river and comes into my property, he is trespassing, I can dispatch of him. That's gross, but that's in a nutshell kind of how we would look at it as a Libertarian Party. It'd be privately owned versus being publicly or state owned, right?
Mhm.
But I digress. The border issue we have now is not just, it's not just about Hispanics. We have people coming from other countries into Mexico and crossing the border. And I've got a number of friends that work border patrol, both in between Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, both for border patrol and other agencies supporting border patrol. And their biggest concern, which there's a lot of concerns, is the Chinese that are trying to come across the border with Mexican people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we have to look at border control differently than the DACA stuff or families trying to cross the border, which if you watch the news, it's always Mexican woman and her 3 kids or a family of 5 or whatever trying to cross the border. That's less of the concern right now for this country. It's the other people funneling in through a broken system.
So I don't know if you remember this or not, but you had a barbecue at your place, and I found out that your girlfriend and I grew up in the same area.
Yeah,
and,
what your area?
Yeah, and my father also came through the United States from Mexico legally. They did all the paperwork. My grandfather sold his business in Mexico, bought a house in Norwalk, California, before they even moved to California.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. My father is very much a Trump supporter. He's very much Republican. Loves his guns, loves his freedom, and he doesn't mind people migrating if it's done legally. Mm. And I think that's the same sentiment. A lot of migrants that have done it legally, including other nationalities, I think that's how they feel also.
Yeah, it's amazing that, and this is regardless of race, it's amazing that once you're in a position where you can go out and earn your whatever it is that you want to, when you have the ability to go out and take care of yourself and your family, earn money, get a job, buy things. When you're able to do that, you start to realize that you don't want people to be taking that stuff from you through taxes, through coercion, i.e. police force, 3-letter agencies, what have you. It is amazing to me that there are still people out there who, whether they're the have or have nots, want to take things from other people because they don't think that they would, one, do it otherwise, or they want more help in supporting some cause that they've conjured up, right? There's this concept of voluntarism, right? Where, and this is something that I believe in deeply, where if you were to take away all the forced taxation and the bloat that comes from stealing people's money and recirculating it into these agencies and organizations that don't function properly, if you were to take away all that bloat and say, hey, I'm going to start a nonprofit for helping Mexican immigrants get citizenship in the United States and obtain their goals, right? If I start an organization and I could do it essentially bloat free and not take money from the government, you know how many people would want to give me their money to be able to do that if they knew that they didn't have to give that money to the government first? I think a lot of people would, but your traditional Democrats don't believe that. They want to make sure there's a system in place so that money goes to where they think it's going to go, and most of them don't realize that money, or a very, very small portion of that money, is going to end up on the cause that they so desperately want to support. You're taking $1 from me and the government's going to take 75% of it, or an organization is going to take 75% of it, and then a quarter is going to end up in the hands of, in the individual, if we're lucky.
And I think, Armando, that's one reason why you started your nonprofit, is because you saw the need to help are vets, and they weren't getting the help from the government that they were hoping to get it from.
Yeah, and we're a little different than a help. I mean, we're just doing
Outreach,
outreach, and it's more of a learn that your brothers are out here having the same problems. Find a brother, go do something, and just get you in a better position. The way that it happens with us is other than the cost of the website and whatever money we spend out doing stuff is the only administrative cost that we have. So I think we bank fees and website and stuff like that are the only real expenses we have. Everyone else is a volunteer, so more than 90% of our intake goes out.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah,
for
but
any organization.
But as an organization like that grows, and they start to see the money that's in, like if you go from, let's say, being a $100,000 organization to $1 million organization to a $10 million organization, inherently there are additional costs or more costs. Being able to figure out how to minimize or mitigate some of those costs is difficult, because a lot of people running these organizations are not business people. They're typically people that have very good hearts about the cause, but lack the business prowess. And when you see the money in the account, it becomes easy to treat yourself in ways you probably shouldn't be treating. We saw that with the Black Lives Matter movement, right? All the houses and cars and everything else. It's easy to be corrupted, right? The more power that you have, larger your balance sheet, larger your income statement, the case may be, a lot of people naturally become corrupted.
So speaking of balance sheets, and I brought it up a little while ago with Chicago, New York, the money that they're spending to house and take care of illegals, do you think that was just a gross accounting error that they had, or was it pandering that they wanted to be in a sanctuary city?
It could be. Like, I don't follow what's going on in other cities or states, or even things at a national level, as much as I do with stuff that really truly impacts me here at a state or a local level. So I'll look at it from a Denver perspective. Denver has received a little over 40,000 immigrants in the last few months. Same stuff that's going on in New York and Chicago, right? We've obviously much smaller scale, but we already have a homeless issue. And 40,000 immigrants being dropped on the city has been, it's exacerbated the issue. One of the things that I always look at is, and I see the news where they're talking about, giving them gift cards or, Amazon, or not, cash cards or whatever to help them get on their feet. Was it California is trying to pass $53 million, I think, which doesn't seem like a lot, but a $53 million bill to be able to put money on cards to give to people. Like, I see that, and to me that's kind of less of the issue. Like, the big thing we're seeing in Denver is the housing thing, right? So people want to house the homeless and want to house the immigrants, and they want to use tax money and be able to pay for these things. But one of the most recent construction projects that's happened in Denver, the total cost average over the units in the building was going to be, I believe, somewhere around $600,000 for what I believe amounts to a 650 or 640 square foot unit or room or studio, or however you want to look at it. When you think about how expensive homes are in Denver anyway, basically giving a $600,000 home to homeless people or to an immigrant into Denver rubs people a wrong way, because there's a lot of people who are struggling in Denver to be able to buy a home or to be able to afford their rent. So I think that it's the housing situation, and I think it's probably is probably of greater financial impact to the cities and states and the individuals, because we're funding it. And I think we should look at that. The giving people $2,000 on a cell phone, to your point, I think that is ridiculous, but I don't think that that's the biggest issue when it comes to this situation.
Let's switch gears a little bit, and this is probably going to fire up a lot of Republicans. let's talk about Second Amendment. As you know, in Colorado, there's been a lot of law changes regarding 2A. Recently, I found out that there's now a waiting period. Is that right? On gun purchases?
I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. That pun was intended. I know that there is. I can tell you that if you have a personal relationship with your FFL, it's pretty easy to file the paperwork and let it just do its course, and you don't really have to worry about a waiting period. But yes, I mean, there is. And I honestly think a waiting period, or I think it's probably more colloquially or more properly called like a cooling off period, makes the most sense, because there are still instances of, people who don't have guns, don't use guns, have nothing to do with guns, and traditionally don't even like guns, getting into a heated situation, wanting to go pick up a gun at a Cabela's or what have you, and then have some type of vengeance on mine. I personally like background checks. I personally like the cooling off period. I think it's just how those get used and how those get politicized becomes the issue.
I think there was a stat Colin Noir had put out there about the cooling off period, and the percentage of people that actually wanted to commit a crime while legally purchasing a firearm was incredibly low. Like 0.0, I think it was like, I hate to say the percentage, but it was like stupid low, like 0.001% of the population. So all it really does is put someone else in danger if they are buying it for self-defense because of a domestic matter, where they might have a woman might have a husband or ex-boyfriend or something to those lines that has been threatening her. Or
a guy that has an ex-girlfriend that's
because we know there are some crazy bitches.
And to those 2 points, Colorado is a red flag law state. Now that gets misused all the time,
right?
But the red flag laws are in place because of those situations. If you are in a relationship and you feel like your partner is going to harm you in some way, shape, or form, if you have a legitimate concern, then that type of protection probably should be there. But rarely are these laws being used as intended. Rather, they're using them, again, as in vengeance to a situation. You're in a relationship, it could be something as menial as you left the toilet seat up, to your relationship's failing and you don't know how to fix it, and since your relationship is failing and inevitably ending, you want to hurt the other person because you feel hurt, and the way that you want to hurt them is to take away their guns or take away their rights or whatever the case may be. And that's more often than not the case, especially with red flag laws. That's how they're being used, and that's again, it's not how it's intended. These are Democrat laws being misused by people of all parties, I am sure.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that I saw recently in California that has been struck down quite a few times now through different circuits of court, the assault weapon ban and magazine capacity ban, and also just recently the ability to purchase ammunition without a waiting period and online. I don't know if you're aware about California having this thing, but my dad brought it to my attention, who still lives in California. He could not buy ammunition online. Also, if he went to a brick and mortar store, he had to wait for a cooling period to actually take home ammunition once he bought it.
I don't really follow what's going on in California except for the exodus of the people and then whatever new taxation makes the news. So it's not surprising, to be honest with you. Being a libertarian, I feel like there's the old joke where someone said that getting a gun should be as difficult as it is to vote. And as somebody who's mailed in his ballots for the last 5 years, it should be that easy. Guns should just be able to show up on your doorstep. Ammo's included. That includes your suppressors. That includes anything and everything. But I also think that to the point of the cooling off period on ammo doesn't make any sense. Why? If you want to get to the root cause of the situation, if you have a cooling off period, it probably should be the weapon, which again, I think that does make sense in a lot of cases. I also think that if you have a relationship with a gun store or a gun broker or a pawn shop or however you're obtaining your weapons, if you have a relationship with that person, much like you'd have a relationship with a barber, they understand if you're coming in frantic, they probably should hold off. They should probably talk you off the ledge. And if it's someone who's just a gun collector, then I don't see the harm in the situation.
Yeah, I mean, they run so much information when you go to purchase. Why can't it just be you get a number that's associated with that, with your ID, your driver's license number, or whatever that number is, social security card number, and they already know, hey, this guy already has 50,000 weapons and whatever. Why the wait again? Why is the wait again? Because you're not buying a new gun to go shoot someone or to go revenge something. You're buying at that point as a secondary or third or just part of a collection.
So to your point, Armando, just recently I bought another gun in Tennessee. This is probably my 7th gun purchase in Tennessee since I've been here in 3 years. It took me 7 minutes to get my background check approved. And that's probably because all they do is recognize that I have gone through the background check here multiple times, and they could do a quick analysis of any arrest records and see that there's nothing there. So they just pencil whip it. You're good to go.
Yeah, no, it's quick. It's quick here. I mean, I just went on. I just bought the new shotgun, and it was the same process, regardless of what you're buying here in Arizona. It's quick, but I mean, you know that someone else going, hey, this isn't this guy's first time here. He's got other weapons here. What's the point of needing a cooling off point at that point? So that's the point I'm making, is that is it really necessary after your first 3 or 5 or whatever that might be?
Well, let's unpack it a little bit more. You guys remember during COVID, I'm not sure if you purchased weapons during COVID, but Americans were purchasing weapons at an all-time high. And here in Colorado, in order for the background check to go through, instead of it being instantaneous or a handful of minutes as it currently would be, I believe I think it was taking almost a week to process all the background checks from people buying weapons. Now, you can look at that situation and say the system is working. There is an inherent cooling off period in this case because of the backlog. Then you have to look at the volume of people who are purchasing weapons. A majority of which were first-time gun owners, and they were doing so because of what was going on during COVID and an inherent not trusting neighbor and not trusting system. To me, I like to look at that situation and say that might have been the only good thing to come out of COVID, was that more people armed themselves because more people started to realize how absolutely fickle.
Oh, I think we lost him. Oh, he's back. Yeah.
I was done with my point anyway.
But I think COVID had a 2-prong effect, because that was also the liberal Summer of Love event that was going on in different cities with the burnings and riotings. So I think there was people scared of what might come of COVID, and then there's also people wanting to protect themselves from riotous groups.
I mean, we may have the same opinion, and perhaps your viewers will have the same opinion, but I look at it like this. We had a manufactured situation in which people started to react against each other. Now, whether that be the pro-vaccines versus the anti-vaccines versus all the other stuff that was going on with the destruction of businesses and downtowns, like, people looked at that and said, I need to take care of myself. I need to take care of my family. I need to take care of my personal property. And that's how they reacted to it. And those are the people that will be driving the results in this upcoming presidential election.
Yeah. So there's one other thing that we might have to skip over, just because you might not be too familiar with what's going on in Arizona. But one of them was pretty national big national news, and that was with Carrie Lake. There was a little bit of suspicion going on with some voter or voting inaccuracies with her governor race, and now she was recording a conversation with the Armando. Who was it? The GOP chair?
Yeah, he was the Republican committee chair person. That what's his name? James, I think it's James, whatever. But apparently the recording, DeWitt. Yeah, Jeff DeWitt. Yeah, apparently the recording is them in a room, and he's telling her to go away. People don't want you to be here. Here's $5 million, and she's telling him, "I'm not going away. It's worth more than $5 million to me, and this is ridiculous." And he basically told her, "Hey, this is there's higher ups that play a game, and you're not playing the game the right way for them. So this is recorded and then brought out, and then I think as soon as it started to become public, he was either stepped down or just fired. You know how it goes. You know how it goes. He resigned, and now someone else new is in there. So if that can happen on a state level, it's really an eye opener for a lot more people to see what happens on a government level nationally. That your government fucking hates you.
Absolutely. I mean, while I'm not terribly familiar with the situation, I'm familiar enough to know that what had happened, right? But you have to look at it like this is it being exposed is one thing, but think about all the other times it happens and it's not exposed at a state level or at a federal level, right? So $5 million to play the game, or because you're not playing the game at a state level, there's a lot of people to take that money and be gone.
Oh yeah. And
I mean, good. I mean, I guess maybe good for her for sticking to her guns. I wasn't a huge fan of her policies personally, but I mean, you have to look at it like that. I mean, the exposure is a great thing that this stuff is getting out. But this is par for the course, whether it's in the news or not. This is how your government functions, whether you're at a federal, state, or local level.
Yeah, no, big time. And I wonder how many eyes get open just by seeing this and going, regardless of what side you're on, just go, okay, what is really going on? Maybe it's time to start voting for these changes, voting for these disruptors. That's the only reason that I am or have been a Trump fan is the disruption. He was able to come in and cause disruption. Yes, there's rhetoric. Yes, there's this. Yes, it's all the same. But there is a disruption that happens with someone that comes out like that you can't reach the pocket because he has enough money to tell you get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, but what really changed with Trump? You had a more entertaining type of president, but I mean, if you take away all of the noise, all of the gregarious personality, and all the things he said he was going to do and never did it, like every other fucking politician. What did he really do? I can understand liking the disruption from, hey, here's a different type of president, or even say, hey, this guy says he's going to drain the swamp, but then he gets into office and all he does is flap his fucking gums for 4 years and didn't do dick. He actually, here's something for you. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but I had this when I was doing my city council run because it was relevant with some of the other people that I was running with. We saw more gun laws passed under Trump than any other 4-year term of any president. So just for you guys who love Trump and love your guns, and you have to understand more laws are getting passed every single day. And if you want to blame somebody, you can look at the presidents, which it's just one person. I had this argument with somebody the other day. I blame the NRA because the NRA, all they fucking do is lobby away your gun laws so they can make money and they can help the fucking politicians pass their own agendas. That's all that it is.
I don't think you would hear any argument about anyone about the NRA. I think the NRA has done more, and a lot of people will agree they have done more harm than good, and have kind of stabbed the gun owners in the back with a lot of things that they have done. But to your point about Trump, he I think he went on record saying that he needed 2 terms to completely do what he wanted to do.
We'll see if that happens now, and then the excuse will be, well, they weren't consecutive. Biden did so much to undermine what I want to do after my first term. I can't get it done in this term. And then he'll probably talk about wanting to run for a third term, or changing laws and to be able to run for a third.
So let me ask you about that. Since he already had 1 term, and you can only have 2 terms as a president, can you have 1 term and then to have a gap in your term, and then have a third term like that?
Nah, it's 2 elected terms. So the only way you'd be able to run for more than 2 elected terms would be in the case if you were a vice president and you're the vice president, the president was deemed unfit or, heaven forbid, assassinated, and you had to carry out that term, then you could theoretically get 2 elected terms afterwards.
So if he wins this election, he could not run for 4 more years after this?
No.
Not currently.
Okay. That would be interesting if that would be okay, just to see what would happen.
It's not at any level. There should be wide sweeping term limits across every political position.
I agree.
Yeah.
So we're talking about lobbyists. Do you think there's ever a point that we do drain the swamp enough to make lobbying illegal or ban it at some point?
Too many people getting paid, man. There's no way.
People are greedy.
And this is the cynicism. I don't think we would ever see a president get elected with a platform that would include that. And if for somehow that happened, I don't think that some bitch would last too long in office. I think they'd bring back the good old American assassination. CIA getting busy.
Yeah. I think it's been discovered recently that the CIA was involved with JFK's assassination. So they've obviously also have admitted to, I think, Muammar Gaddafi. They were involved with his, and
got their hands in everything.
Yeah, there was a few other ones, but let's cover what's coming up because we're almost out of time. Let's go to first the Trump issues with Colorado and Maine ballots. What's the temperature right now in Colorado with that?
I don't think it doesn't matter. Let's look at it. For a prime example is this. Let's look what happened with the Nevada primaries today. Even though the Nevada primaries are nothing more than a litmus test. Trump wasn't on the ballot in the Nevada primaries, and you had over 63% of people vote to not have a candidate. They didn't like the other candidates, so 63% said, you know what, we don't like any of the candidates on the ballot. We don't support any of these. So here's NOTA, right? In the Libertarian Party, we've got this thing called NOTA, none of the above. It's basically when all the candidates are on there are shit, you can vote for none of the above because it's the last item on the voting list there, and that's it. That's what Nevada did. So Nevada said basically, Trump's not on the ballot, we're not going to vote for anyone else. I think Nikki Haley got 30%. 63% said no one, and that implies that 63% of the people that voted the primary, which I think was 45,000 people that voted that way, were basically saying we want Trump. So unless the RNC, the Republican National Committee, decides that unless they're going to put somebody up besides Trump, Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. Trump is going to be the next president. And I say that unfortunately because I'm not a Trump supporter. But so the ballot thing doesn't matter. This is all primaries. He will be if he gets a nomination from the Republican Party, he will be on the ballot when we vote in November. All this other stuff is just fluff and bullshit. That's all it is. You got Democratic states saying they don't want a felon on the felon or a pedophile or whatever on the ballot when they've been putting these people on there regardless of party for years.
So the ballot issue has only been just for primaries. It hasn't been for the general election.
Correct.
Okay. Next question would be the court cases that Trump has right now. Do you think all of this is just a direct attempt at emptying his pockets so that way it hurts him in that regard, and also in it doesn't pass the eye test to other voters?
I think you nailed it, right. So I think that's what it is. I think it's a matter of just draining his pockets, which he's got deep pockets. He's been through bankruptcy a few times as well. So what are you going to do about that? I wish there was a translation between his legal issues and how people would vote, but unfortunately, people who support Trump are idolizing him for what they think he is and what they want him to do, and that's just it's not the case. So you know how it is, and heavy lies the crown is an old adage, right? So the more you have, the more people come for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, he's done a very good job of putting himself out there, president or otherwise. He puts himself out there. He's a very unlikable person to a lot of people, and those people want to take him down a peg. I don't think it's going to work, but we will see what happens.
This new issue that came out with Fani Willis sleeping with her special prosecutor, and then finding out that she's been taking vacations, pretty much using Georgia tax dollars. They're gonna be subpoenaed. It sounds like. Do you think this is going to hurt their case at all, or is this just a pause on what's going on with that case?
So I'm not terribly familiar with it. I knew about the affair. And I don't understand why honestly it really matters. I think that I don't understand what people's personal lives shouldn't matter. I think that when the Carrie Lake thing, like if it becomes some type of bribery or something like that, then there probably is an issue. We kind of tackled this situation also with the Black Lives Matter and the nonprofit organization thing as well. It's that's not necessarily dissimilar, whether it's an NPO or whether it's an election candidate or a judge or whatever the case may be. So I think that it doesn't. I don't know enough about it to really truly comment.
Because even though they might get in trouble for it, the charges still stand, right? They can just bring in another prosecutor.
I mean, that would be the right. I mean, it would have to. Yes, that's what should happen. But we've seen times where judges should have been removed and haven't been removed, and you kind of already know where this is going to go. This typically has happened in election cases, right? Where there's, allegations of election fraud and stuff like that. Like you've got people overseeing these things who are naturally biased, and you're always going to get a biased result. And depending on which jurisdiction you're in, whether if you're in a Democratic city or a Republican town or at the state level, like it's all, the cards are always stacked. So when you get in these situations, it's not like you're getting, something, you're not going to put yourself in a situation where you're going to get an unbiased result. It's not like a murder trial anymore, which even then that still seems kind of fucked up.
Yeah. So let's move on to, another court case that's not really a court case, but another legal issue with Hunter Biden. First question is, did you ever do coke with Hunter?
I never got the luxury to, but I can tell you what, you know for a fact that the safest cocaine in this fucking country, he has it.
Yes.
And that dude's not gonna die of fentanyl.
No, but seriously,
I had to fly it in for him.
But seriously, how fucked is he?
You know who his daddy is, don't you?
Yeah, but I mean, regardless if he's pardoned, there's still going to be some sort of verdict, right?
I still maintain that this could be completely swept under the rug like everything else. Like just something happens and that's it. I have no faith in the process to say that, whether it's obvious to you if he's guilty or not, which I think from the guy working on the laptop on up. Like we all know what was going on, and every day or every week there seems like to be something else. And he's an untouchable. You have to accept it for what it is.
Yeah. Joe Biden's mental health. Do you see that as a major concern for the Democratic voters?
I think mental health is depression. I think what this guy has is just he's an old dude who's unfit to do his job. And I really, really, really wish that would resonate with a lot of voters. I think it may, but this is one of those things when it comes like, hey, we need to stop electing geriatrics into especially presidential level, right? I would like to say that we're going to start to see this change a little bit. It's not like we're going to immediately go back to having JFK getting elected when he was 38 or however old he was. But it would be nice to see, or like even was it Vivek's in his early 40s now, or maybe he's in his late 30s. Like it would be nice to see that type of pendulum swing when it comes to the age and mental capacity of our presidents. But it'll take years for us to see that change. And I think a larger problem that we have to see here is that in this country, our intellectual people, which we can all argue on what that means anymore, people who have the wherewithal to be, or the wherewithal mentally to be able to, or intellectually to be able to do a good job as president, are doing other shit because there's better money or earlier money in doing this stuff. They're starting tech businesses. They're doing other things. They don't want to get into politics because they see how absolutely corrupt it is, and they don't want to be a president. So the pool of people that we have to become president, we already see who they are between, our senators, our House of Representatives, judges and lawyers. Like these are people who probably aren't going to do a good job in the first place. And that's our pool for people who are going to be president, no matter what age they are. Yeah. So it's a broken system, and it is what it is. But specific to Biden and his mental feebility, hopefully we see a younger president at some point, but right now it seems like Trump's going to be the president starting next year, and we're going to go 4 more years before we have to even have an opportunity to have somebody younger in the seat.
Do you believe in Bidenomics?
People just like to take poor economical decisions and put a nice, cool slang term on them, whatever it is. This inflation issue started well before Biden. The COVID stuff started before Biden. The decisions made as part of COVID that led to this recent round of super increased inflation started under Trump. Now, the vast majority of decisions occurred in between the end of Trump's presidency, the beginning of Biden's. But we also have to look at the fact that it's a president. President has no control over the Federal Reserve and the borrowing and so on and so forth. Somebody in office comes up with the idea of sending a stimulus check, and the Democrats are like, you know what? We like to give money away, so this is what we do. We will do this. And that's where we're at now. So you call it whatever you want. It's shit policy. Yeah.
I just can't wait to refinance my house and get off this 5% interest rate.
I just bought my place a month ago, right? So my old place, my interest rate was under 3%. And obviously my new place, it's not fucking under 3%. And when I went through this, I knew I was going to have to deal with it for a little while, but everyone knows as we get closer to the presidential election, the Democrats are going to want to artificially push down rates again to make themselves look better. Look at what we're doing. It's like the gas prices going down. Hey, we're doing something. It's all fucking marionette puppet string bullshit. The rates are going to come down. I'm going to refinance. Trump will win the election. We'll go into next year. We're going to 2025, and the shit's going to spike up again, and rates will be closer to 10%. So yes, I'm trying to get mine down as low as I can. We'll be lucky if it just jumped back up to 7% or close to. It was down to like 6.5%. I was really hoping to see 6% once we got into like September, October-ish. So
man, yeah, I would like to have a little bit of extra money in my pocket at some point. So I'm hoping for that.
Feel that.
Yeah. Let's get on another topic. A lot of people don't know this or may not realize it, but long time ago, you and I were co-owners of a company called Colorado Jeepers, and we had a very large contingent of people in our Facebook group. Um, we met on a trail. Back then you had a 2-door JK. That was really nice. And you're now making the switch like a lot of older wheelers do, and you're now into overlanding.
Mhm.
How great is that for you? I mean, like, is it just more relaxing? What was the big appeal?
There's a few things, right? Like, so the rock crawling and the jeeping thing is wonderful. Getting away from it was part because a lot of people, at least at that time, we were both a little bit younger. I did, even though it wasn't really I could have had 2 vehicles and had a daily driver and then had something I could go break and screw up on the weekend. But at the end of the day, when you're doing something and there is a legitimate risk of trail breaking down and being stuck for a day or 2 if you have a massive trail repair, or having somebody pull you out, or having to call somebody, like we have a Colorado 4x4 recovery group here in Colorado, which they just comb the mountains picking up people that get stuck in snow in their Subarus because they thought they could clear it and there's 3 feet of snow, all the way up to the guys that are broken down on like Hell's Revenge or trails like that, right? Like, for me, it was just like I needed to get away from the possibility of lost time. And for me, also part of it was the Jeep community the vast majority of the Jeep community is great, but there's also some really shitty people in that space. And we saw quite a few of that with the more that our group grew, I should say. So that was part of it. Another part of it is I went from the JK, I went through a divorce, I went through just like I wanted to start over, so I sold that. I ended up buying an LJ. I had the LJ for a year and I barely drove it because I did buy like a early 90s Camry. So I had the 2 vehicles, but I had 2 used older vehicles. So I did that, and then I got into the 4Runner, and then I got into the 4Runner. It was just I wanted to be in nature more. And it was also because I just got old enough to the point where it's like I just want to be out and away from the city, but I still need to be in the city because I have work and consulting obligations and everything else. So that's kind of the natural path that it went. But to the point, or to the question, right? Just hopping on a trail and just driving for, I drive, I think, Armando, I heard that you're in Arizona. Like, I go to Arizona 2 or 3 times a year. We take different drives every time. We take, dirt road for 60, 80, 100 miles, right? And just, you're in the middle of nowhere, you're on a dirt road. And I don't think anything feels better than that, whether you're camping or not, right? It's just like being off the pavement and mitigating the risk of breakage. It was just where I wanted to be with it.
You guys actually had the same truck.
We did. The Ram?
Yep, the Ram. I think you have the 2500, right, Joey?
So mine is a 3500.
Oh,
it was built. Yes, I know. It's 3500 that I ordered on January 6th, 2023, and or 2022, and after it took forever for them to build it, it was shipped up to Detroit, and AEV, American Exhibition Vehicles, finished it up by turning it into what they call a Prospector XL. So it's a 3500 Cummins diesel, high output, lifted 40s, the whole thing.
So we can blame Scott Blum for
you're doing my Blum.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, Scott. But yeah, we could blame Scott for the delay of your truck. Scott, I don't know if you heard the podcast with him on it, but he is a big wig in at Fiat, Chrysler, Jeep.
Yeah, he's the Jeep marketing side.
Yeah.
Can't blame those guys for all the COVID. We couldn't get sensors.
No, we could for him.
We will.
We will for this guy. Yeah. We blame him for everything.
Sorry, Scott, if you're listening to this, I'm trying to save your ass.
No, there's no saving Scott's ass around here.
So when at some point we'll have to plan a trip, because I do want to get out and explore a little bit more, not on rock crawling trails. And as you know, I have the Tacoma, so that's prime overlanding rig right there. I just need to outfit it a little bit, and then we'll be good to go. So
outfitted.
Just
go
upfitted. Yeah, we just moved about 6 weeks ago, living on the side of a mountain southwest of Denver, dirt road up the hill. So come on out. There's plenty of dirt roads and plenty of mountains to explore out here.
Yeah, I want to get out there and shoot some deer or elk, whatever crosses your path.
Dude, and we were having deer. I don't know if you saw this. We were having deer almost every single day. We got foxes and rabbits too. But we were having deer almost every single day. Same group of up to 12 or 13 that would always be in the neighborhood or in our backyard or whatever. And then we went like 3 days and we hadn't seen any. I'm like, man, what the hell's going on? I was asking the girlfriend. I'm like, and this was within 2 days ago. I was like, it's in the afternoon. I was like, we haven't seen the deer in a couple of days. That's kind of odd. And we took the dogs out at like 9:15 local time to get them, to go to the restroom so we could get ready for bed. And I came down, got the dogs in, and went downstairs and getting ready for bed. And I got a notification from the security system that there was an animal detected in the driveway. I was like, okay, whatever. Did my thing, went and checked the security footage, and it was a mountain lion. And that's why we had not seen the deer for a few days. Yeah, big sumbitch too.
Can you hunt those there, or are they protected?
They're protected, much like the bear are, which is kind of unfortunate. And getting tags, like you can hunt mountain lion with tags, but there's a big political movement now to try to minimize the hunting of the precious kitty cats. It's very, very wild to me because these things, man, they're pretty ferocious.
Yeah.
They're opportunistic hunters, so like, I've got, amongst all the dogs that I have, I've got a little toy Aussie who's like 9 pounds, and he would be the perfect damn snack for a mountain lion to snatch him up and take off with them. So
yeah.
I would like to be able to defend them on the off chance were to happen, but also don't necessarily want to shoot something that doesn't need to be shot, and certainly something that I'm not going to eat. Mm-hmm. So I understand why there's certain strictures in place, but unless the mountain lion comes after me, I can't shoot it.
Yeah. So you're not going to leave your front door open, 10 pounds of meat in the bowl, and then just say intruder?
Exactly. Yeah. No, we had that conversation. The girlfriend and I, we had that conversation. It's like, it is what it is, man. Like we saw it. It's been a couple of days. We haven't seen it come back. I don't think it was with all of what's with our neighbors, right? Our neighbors are, they're homesteaders effectively, right? Chickens, they raise animals. They've got giant outside dogs. These dogs actually scale their fences. And typically when I have an animal notification in my yard, it's either mine or theirs, but the mountain lion was just a complete anomaly. So if a mountain lion is going to be opportunistic, it's likely not going to be when we take the dogs out to go take a leak. It'll probably be the neighbor's chickens, neighbor's ducks, their dogs that are out at all times of the day.
Yeah, the sitters.
What are your thoughts on Colorado releasing wolves?
It's been interesting to hear the people. So I will answer your question, but I want to touch it politically. What we're starting to see with some of our ballot measures is the way the ballot measures are written. And in Colorado, which is unlike what I've seen in a few other states that I've lived in, is they will tell you, if you vote yes, this is what happens. If you vote no, this is what happens. And we're increasingly seeing that the verbiage they're putting on the ballots is inaccurate, and you can tell it's being written in a way to sway people a certain direction. And that is what happened with the wolf vote to release the wolves here, which, let's be honest with you, they were already here anyway. They are already coming down from Wyoming, coming down from Idaho. We are already seeing them in the northwest region of the state. But by releasing additional ones, now we're seeing this thing kind of blow up in, we'll say, the voters' faces, because the politicians got what they wanted. And now you've got a growing community, or a growing number of wolves that are effectively just opportunistically taking down ranchers' cattle, taking out their lifeline, right? Their job, their what makes their income, or at least part of their income. And the wolves are making it really, really hard for ranchers to stay in business. A lot of ranches are selling. They're getting bought up by large corporations, like, let's say, somebody like Tyson, even though we're talking about cattle versus chickens. But you see large organizations like that. JBS, which is based out of Greeley, I think it is the largest cattle producer in the United States. They're buying up these once small family ranches and turning it into essentially another, just an extension of the factory farming. So I personally would like to hunt a wolf. That's just a very personal thing. It's not like me trying to be Liam Neeson in my old age, but I just like I would, as a novice, I would really like to go on that kind of a hunt.
Yeah. One of my friends lives in Knoxville out here in Tennessee. One of the problems that he has right now, and that I've seen here in Middle Tennessee, is that some of the people that are leaving California are coming to Tennessee and other red states and trying to implement these failed California policies. He had mentioned that there is someone running for a city council out in Knoxville, and is just total Californian, total, stereotypical liberal and liberal policies. Do you know of any laws, or do you think there could be any laws that would restrict people that are new to areas and say, for example, you cannot... Oh, I lost him again.
You're fine.
Okay. Do you think there could be anything that says you just moved here, you cannot run for council or office or anything like that until you're established, or any, something to that effect? Because let's face it, California policies are ruining other places.
Well, I mean, let's take it away from the state, right? So California is a absolutely gorgeous state. It is being overrun by people with policies that we don't agree with. That is going to happen. You still hear me?
Yep.
Good. It beeped at me. I don't know what that was. I got to plug it in because my phone's about to die. But so we have to separate the policies from the state, because let's be honest, you've done the Rubicon Trail. You're from California. You know how beautiful that state is.
Yep.
There we go. So the policies are the issue. You're not going to see could you see a state, and it would be someplace like maybe Nome in South Dakota. Maybe she's like, hey, we want to restrict the ability for these type of these type of policies to be put up to a vote in our state, right? Well, what you're doing really there is you're kind of infringing on people's First Amendment rights. You're also infringing on their ability to freely move from one state to another state, which you and I have both moved quite a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you're going to see that happen. If it were to happen, it would be in a smaller, we'll call it less significant federally state, like a South Dakota, North Dakota, maybe a Wyoming or something like that. But the real way to tackle that issue is, and let's think about what's happening in Texas and Arizona specifically, because those are the ones that are seeing a lot of the migration, if you will, of Californians into and potentially changing some of the the local or the state politics. You just have to, if you're on with our side of a lot of these policies, you really kind of have to make sure that people are voting the way that you want them to, right? Or the way that, the state was founded upon, keeping a red state traditionally red as much as a traditionally blue state would like to remain blue. Unfortunately, I think the reality of it is going to be, and I saw this a little bit in Idaho, and it is happening currently in Colorado, or it's actually already happened in Colorado, is you're going to have to, people have this weird, I always call it like a weird right. People always feel like that this is my house, my home, and I'm never going to leave. And they really like to complain when things start to fail around them politically, right? Mm-hmm. And they're afraid or feel like they shouldn't have to move to be around like-minded people. I left Denver because I hated the fucking people. More and more people were coming in. More and more people that did not share my political views. I was living in a city with a very, very Democratic city council. And even with my friend and then other Republicans who would get voted onto the city council, both Republicans and Democrats alike, I know people don't want to admit this because it happens at the federal level as well, carte blanche, just signing everything every year. Well, we did this last year. We need the funding to keep it up this year, so we're going to keep doing it this year. There's no argument on reduction. There's no argument on removal. We do the same thing every single year, whether we're Republicans or Democrats. And that was what's happening in Aurora. That happens in Denver, and it happens in a lot of cities, where it's just, we got to keep passing this thing. We got to keep doing this. We got to keep doing it the same way we've always done it, because we've already committed to it. Well, sometimes when you commit to something, you can look at it like a relationship. Sometimes you realize it's a bad fucking investment and you got to get out of it. What we need to see is a lot of cities realizing that we need to change some of these policies because they're spending money that they don't have, and the policies are poor in the first place. And it doesn't matter with Californians moving or not. There's probably some good people that are leaving California are not all bringing the poor progressive policies. They unfortunately because of those policies, are getting priced out of California, and now they're going to go to some place where there's a cheaper cost of living, and they want to implement some of those policies because they really like them, and they want to do it in an area that may not necessarily be receptive to it. And hopefully we will see, with all that movement, you will see the political battles where maybe the Californians do affect some type of change of a policy in a city, and then that city starts to push back. Or what you'll see is what's happening in California already is you'll see the people who have differing policies just moving again. Like, I left Denver and moved into a small mountain community. Mm-hmm. Don't be afraid to move is what I'm trying to say. People stop feeling like, we're stuck. We got to fight. Fuck, then move. Your life's too damn short. Just move.
Move. I mean, it's easier said than done for a lot of people, though.
Yeah, kids have schools. I understand that, but you have to understand that these are things that people have, lack of better terms, have complicated their lives with. You have made these decisions. Now you're in the situation. You either deal with it or you make the necessary change, which could be leaving. And a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people, like you said, are packing up their kids, packing up their things, selling their homes, and heading out.
So I wonder if it would just take some creative thinking. For example, if California is going to have a 10-day cooling period for guns, why couldn't we, say, have a 1-year cooling period for residents running for office?
Well, you mean, again, and that already exists. I mean, that exists here. So you can't just move into a new city and immediately run for office. I mean, it's like, so
there is some sort of
just inherently, right? Like, if you want to run for office, you have to. Well, let's do it reverse chronologically. Before the election, you have to campaign. Campaigning takes a while. You have the paperwork that you have to submit to be able to qualify to run for the position, which in a lot of these cases you've had to have lived in the areas which you're trying to, like, especially in local elections, you have to have lived in the area in which you're trying to run, the election. So the district or ward, you have to have lived there for 12 months or 24 months or something like that. These things are already in place in a lot of places. Mm-hmm. It's not like California. It's not like Californians or let's say Democrats are moving in, infiltrating a city and immediately running for an office within the first few months and then affecting change immediately. These things don't happen this fast.
It feels that
people
way,
showing up, because we're getting old and time flies by, buddy.
Yeah, it's more of who they're voting for, not that they're becoming the politician. It's more of they left because it was shitty. They left because it was expensive. They left because it was too much taxes, and they still vote for this stupid D. Like, it's gonna fucking change. Come on.
All cities have your blue-haired Democrat that wants to take the people's money and give it to the causes that they find appropriate. Right, yeah. And it's everybody's. If you want to talk about the biggest issue in that, and I can say this is simply from the election that I ran, right? I lived in a ward it was the largest ward in Aurora, and at that time it had about 61,000 people who were eligible to vote. The winner of the election got 5,000 votes. You don't have people showing up to try to deter or affect the change that you want to see, right? So we have people who don't vote. the only, and I can say this from, what we see in the Libertarian Party, especially with donations, right? You get a spike every 4 years when there's a presidential election because people start caring about what's going to happen to the country, and they tie that to the president, not realizing that it really has absolutely fucking nothing with what's going to happen to you locally. And it's people will vote every 4 years, and then the elections that happen the other 3 years in between the presidential cycles, you're lucky to get 10, 15, 20% of the same number of votes. People come out and vote. So if you're running for, say, a local office, and your election is at the same year as a presidential election, you're going to get a lot more people coming out to vote. But if your election is off cycle, let's say it's, we got a presidential election in 2024, let's say you're running in 2026, you have a better chance of winning because you have 20% of the votes, right? If you can garner a few more of that 20%, it goes a lot longer than if you have to compete with 5 times as many votes.
Yeah. Just locally.
So get out and vote.
Yeah, just locally where I live, you have 450,000 people in the county. 185,000 actually voted in the presidential election last cycle. So you're less than half. So if you're looking at that, what the differential is, you get 20,000 people in here could really swing a vote, and they're coming in from a different state, and they're voting for their letter of choice. That changes things significantly from what the historical position of that county is.
Yeah, it is actually a very, and this is just going off stuff that I've heard talked about in the past, but you have a very small percentage of people that once they move, immediately change their basically their voting registration. They typically will wait, not the first election cycle, they'll wait until the next election cycle, the subsequent year, before changing their voter registration. And one, that's because once you move, you have a lot of stuff going on, of course. But then also it's like, do we really know what's truly going on in the area? And they want to see what that looks like. They want to see their results. They want to see that democracy in action before actually immersing themselves in it. So there is, again, this delay of every decision that gets made now does not necessarily immediately, there's not an immediate result. Sometimes these things take a year or 2 or 3 or 4. And that's why I say when you see this exodus of people from California, we won't see these changes immediately, right? Like you're in Arizona. I don't know how long you've been there, but the Californians coming into Arizona has been happening for a while, and you have seen the state go from traditional red to purple, and it's becoming closer and closer. It's becoming more and more and more democratic, and it's unfortunate, but
yes. I in fact moved here from California in 2007 because of exactly what you said. You got to just get up and move. I was done with it. I was tired of the politics. I was tired of the overtaxing. I was tired of everything that had to be. You had to be out there and to be able to survive out there. It was ridiculous. A house was ridiculous. We had on top of our house, we had overpriced HOA. We had Memoirs, which is a beautiful thing. Memoirs. Let's see. We're going to build a community, but we're going to make you pay for it. So the developer can decide to make a community, but then say, okay, we're not going to pay for it. We're going to make you pay for it over the next 10 years with a bond, and we're going to give it a cool name that sounds like something delicious. So they call it a Memoirs, and you're like, oh, this is Memoirs thing. I'm going to get that. No. And then you pay for that for a 10-year period on top of everything else. And then your property taxes are ridiculous. And then everything else that goes with that, it got ridiculous. We came to Arizona, and essentially my house in California out here was went from probably a $700,000 house to a $185,000 house just by moving 400 miles east.
Yeah.
And everything changed. But now, because of so many people moving here and the shift here, Arizona's real estate has become ungodly. and you can't even. You hear more of the natives and the locals that have been here forever complain about, well, it's not, we can't buy $100,000 house anymore. You're not getting that anymore. That's done and gone. That $100,000 house is gone, and that was a draw for us. We came out here like, what kind of shit house am I going to buy for $120,000, which is what the ad said. We walked in the house, went, this is exactly what our house looks like in California for $170,000. Where do I sign? We moved a month later.
Yeah, I was the same way. I grew up in California. I was laid off from a company. They laid off the entire Western region. Couldn't find work. Moved to Colorado because at the time, Colorado, this was in 2000, Colorado was booming with tons of jobs. Moved there. I purposely didn't buy a house because I didn't have a girlfriend, didn't have a wife. I didn't want to settle down in a property that I didn't know if I was going to keep for a period of time. When I did finally get married and we started to look for a house, I realized, shit, I'm kind of priced out here. Not only that, the politics is really, really, really taking a turn. And just like to Joey's point, we moved. Now we're in Tennessee. And to your point again, I was registered. I've been registered independent since I was 18 years old. When I moved to Tennessee, I registered as a Republican. Yeah.
I think one on the question list you brought up, registering as independent, you register for however you want to register, but please register. But the impact on registering as independent, it varies by state. In some states, means you won't get to participate in either the Democrat or the Republican primary.
Yeah, primary.
And in some states, you can participate in both. If you register as an independent.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, Arizona you can't.
But as a registered libertarian, I don't get to partake in either. So if I was an independent, which there's a lot of libertarians who register as independent, I could partake in both the primaries and not that I necessarily need to because these things are already fixed anyway. But it's these nuances, right? Like, so you kind of have to learn what happens in your state, how the state balloting works, how the primaries and caucuses work, how that's going to work, how the Secretary of State functions before you try to decide on, am I going to register for how I actually vote? Or even doing the research on how you actually vote. Because a lot of people don't research anything. They just like, I'm a Republican, so I'm going to vote for all the Republicans. I'm a Democrat, so I'm going to vote for all the Democrats. And that is a very old school way of going about things. I really wish people would spend more time getting to know candidates, researching ballot measures, educating themselves on these things that they are going to vote on or should be voting on before, filling out the little Scantron or going to a polling place and punching your ballot.
Yep.
Well, look, we've covered a lot. And we kind of went over more time than I told you where we're going to be. So I think we'll wrap it up here.
It's still early for me. He's an hour ahead of me or an hour behind me.
Yeah.
But I'm an hour ahead of you.
Yeah.
I'm behind you. Sorry.
But yeah, this was a good conversation. And I think this is something that more people need to have is conversations like this that are just open-minded for the most part too. So thanks for coming on and talking with us and picking your brain about politics because let's face it, Armando, all of our other friends are fucking stupid. They don't know this shit.
There's the average voter now spends all their time, arguing about shit on Facebook about things they don't know anything about.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, I would really wish more people would educate themselves on the ramifications of how they vote, what their thought processes are, how that's going to impact not only themselves, their friends, their family. I just really wish people cared more. And these things are not simple. It's intentionally complicated. It's done that way to suppress and keep people ignorant. That's why so many of our friends are stupid when it comes to this stuff. It's because that's how it's all designed. And unless you care, unless you do the research, unless you ask the questions, you're never going to know.
Yep. Good point. All right, folks. Well, Joey, thanks again. Armando.
My pleasure.
We've learned a lot, so we'll carry this on into maybe the next episode and bring up some other points, and we'll keep track of the primaries, and we'll follow this into the general election too.
Yep,
It's going to be
definitely.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a wild year.
All right, folks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.